At exactly 5 a.m., while the entire city was asleep, one bedroom light quietly turned on. No applause, no audience, no cameras, just one ordinary teenager making an ordinary decision that would eventually create an extraordinary life. His name was Ethan. At first glance, there was nothing special about him. He wasn't the smartest student in school. He wasn't the strongest athlete. He wasn't the most talented kid in his neighborhood. In fact, most people believed he would never become successful. But what they didn't know was that success was already beginning. Not with a huge breakthrough, not with luck, but with one small decision repeated every single day. Ethan slowly got out of bed, tied his running shoes, grabbed his old hoodie, and stepped outside into the cold morning air. The streets were empty. Streetlights flickered softly. A gentle breeze moved through the silent neighborhood. His body begged him to go back inside. His mind whispered, "Skip today. One day won't matter." For a moment, he almost listened, but then he remembered a promise he had made to himself. "No matter how I feel, I will show up." That morning, he ran only 1 mile. It wasn't fast. It wasn't impressive. No medals. No social media posts. No one even knew he had done it. But that single mile became the first brick in the foundation of a completely different future. Just 1 year earlier, Ethan's life looked completely different. He dreamed of becoming successful. He watched motivational videos every night. He bought planners, downloaded productivity apps, started workout programs, created vision boards. Every Monday felt like a brand new beginning. But every Friday, he had already quit. Every goal ended the same way. He blamed his school. He blamed his parents. He blamed bad luck. Deep inside, he believed successful people were simply born different. Until one afternoon, everything changed. It happened in the backyard of his grandfather's small farmhouse. The old man was planting tiny oak seeds in the soil. Ethan watched quietly before asking, "Grandpa, why are you planting these? You'll probably never live long enough to sit under these trees." His grandfather smiled without looking up. Then he gently covered the seed with dirt and said, "Maybe I won't, but someone will." Ethan stood there silently. The old man brushed the dirt from his hands and continued, "Most people want giant trees, but almost nobody has the patience to protect a tiny seed." Those words stayed in Ethan's mind long after that day ended. He didn't fully understand them yet, but something inside him had begun to change. That night, before going to bed, he looked into the mirror. For the first time, he stopped asking, "How can I become successful?" Instead, he asked a completely different question. What small thing can I do tomorrow that I'll still be doing 1 year from now? The next morning, the alarm rang again at 5 a.m. This time, Ethan didn't feel motivated. There was no inspirational music, no sudden burst of energy. His legs were sore from yesterday's run. His eyes were heavy. For a few seconds, he stared at the ceiling. Then he remembered his grandfather's words, "Protect the seed." He smiled, got out of bed, tied his shoes, and stepped outside once again. 1 mile, just 1 mile. The second day wasn't exciting. Neither was the third, or the 10th. In fact, nothing looked different. His body looked the same. His grades stayed average. His bank account was still empty. The only thing that had changed was that Ethan kept showing up. Weeks passed. His friends started noticing his new routine. One morning, they laughed as they saw him running. "Why do you wake up so early? You'll quit in a week, like always. You really think 1 mile is going to change your life?" Ethan simply smiled. A few months earlier, those words would have hurt him. Now, they became fuel, because he had finally understood something most people never do. Results are invisible, until they suddenly become impossible to ignore. Every morning, he added one small habit: 10 pages of reading, 30 minutes of studying, a short workout, 5 minutes of writing in his journal. None of these habits looked powerful by themselves, but together, they slowly transformed the person he saw in the mirror. There were difficult days. Days when it rained, days when he felt sick, days when he wanted to stay in bed. On those mornings, he made one simple rule: never miss twice. If he had one bad day, the next day, he showed up no matter what, because he realized something important. Missing once is a mistake. Missing twice is the beginning of a new habit. Months went by. The changes were still small, but they were real. His mind became calmer. His body became stronger. His confidence quietly grew. He no longer compared himself to other people. Instead, he compared himself to the person he had been yesterday. For the first time in his life, progress wasn't exciting, it was peaceful. One evening, after finishing another ordinary day, Ethan opened his journal. He flipped back to the first page. The goals that once felt impossible now looked much closer, not because life had become easier, but because he had become stronger. He closed the journal, looked out the window, and whispered to himself, maybe success isn't about doing something incredible once. Maybe it's about doing ordinary things, incredibly consistently. And without realizing it, the tiny seed his grandfather had planted was finally beginning to grow. 6 months passed. To most people, Ethan still looked ordinary. He wasn't famous. He wasn't rich. He didn't have millions of followers. But something had changed. Something far more valuable than money. He had become the kind of person who kept promises to himself. Every morning at 5 a.m., he woke up without negotiating with his mind. Every workout made him a little stronger. Every page he read made him a little wiser. Every journal entry made his thoughts a little clearer. The changes were so small that no one noticed them, until one day, everyone did. At school, his teachers noticed that he was more focused than ever before. His grades began to rise. Friends who once laughed at him now started asking for study tips. People saw the results, but they never saw the hundreds of mornings that created them. One afternoon, Ethan walked past a coffee shop where he noticed an old man sitting alone with a laptop. The man smiled and asked, "Do you come here every day after school?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, sir. I read here for an hour before going home." The old man looked impressed. "You know what the rarest skill in today's world is?" Ethan shook his head. "It's consistency," the man replied. "Most people chase motivation. Winners build routines." Those words hit Ethan deeply. That evening, instead of wasting hours scrolling through social media, he opened his laptop and started learning a new skill: video editing. He wasn't good at it. His first projects looked terrible. He made mistakes. He wanted to quit more than once. But then he remembered his rule: never miss twice. So he kept practicing. 1 hour a day, every single day. 30 days later, he was better. 90 days later, he was confident. 6 months later, someone offered him his first paid project. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but when the payment notification appeared on his phone, he smiled, because it wasn't just money, it was proof. Proof that small efforts, repeated every day, eventually become valuable. That night, Ethan called his grandfather. "I got paid today," he said with excitement. His grandfather laughed softly. "I knew you would." Ethan asked, "How?" The old man answered, "Because I wasn't watching your results. I was watching your habits." Ethan stood silently, staring at the stars. For the first time, he realized that success had never arrived overnight. It had been quietly growing every single morning. One decision, one habit, one day at a time. And that was only the beginning. The biggest transformation wasn't in his bank account. It wasn't in his grades. It wasn't even in his body. The biggest transformation was the person he had become. 3 years later, Ethan's life looked completely different. The teenager who once struggled to stay focused had become someone people admired. He had graduated with honors. His freelance work had grown into a successful business. He was financially independent far earlier than anyone expected. But if you asked Ethan what changed his life, he would never mention money. One Saturday morning, he received an invitation to speak at his old high school. As he walked through the familiar hallways, memories came rushing back. The classrooms, the lockers, the same track where he used to run alone before sunrise. Only this time, hundreds of students were waiting to hear his story. When Ethan stepped onto the stage, the room became silent. He looked at the students and smiled. "I know what many of you are thinking," he began. "I don't have enough talent. I'm not lucky enough. Other people have better opportunities than I do." He paused for a moment. "I used to believe those things too." The audience listened carefully. Then Ethan pulled an old notebook from his backpack. It was the same journal he had started years ago. The pages were worn. The cover was faded. Inside were thousands of tiny daily goals. Run 1 mile. Read 10 pages. Study 30 minutes. Write 1 lesson. "I didn't become successful because I was extraordinary," he said. "I became successful because I stopped waiting for extraordinary moments." The secret wasn't working harder once. It was refusing to quit on ordinary days. The room was completely quiet. Then Ethan asked everyone to stand up. He looked around and said, "Raise your hand if you've ever started something and quit." Almost every hand went into the air. He smiled. "Good. That means you're human. But now ask yourself a different question. What if you stayed consistent for 1 full year? How different would your life become?" No one answered. They didn't need to. The answer was already inside their minds. After the speech ended, a shy freshman approached Ethan. He looked nervous. "I don't think I'll ever be successful," the boy admitted. Ethan smiled because he saw himself in that young face. He placed the old journal into the boy's hands. "You don't need to believe in yourself today. You only need to believe in tomorrow. And when tomorrow comes, show up again." As Ethan walked away, he realized something beautiful. Success wasn't measured by the money he had earned. It was measured by the lives he inspired. And somewhere deep inside, he knew the greatest chapter of his story was still waiting to be written. The small apartment where Ethan had once struggled to wake up at 5 a.m. was now just a memory. His business had grown. His life had changed. People called him successful. But every morning, before checking his phone, before answering emails, before the world demanded his attention, he still followed the same simple routine. Wake up, exercise, read, learn, right? The habits that once built his future had now become part of who he was. One cold autumn morning, Ethan received a phone call. It was from his grandfather. His voice sounded weaker than ever before. "Ethan, I want you to come home." A few hours later, Ethan arrived at the old farmhouse. Its branches stretched high into the sky. Birds rested on its limbs. Children played in its shade. Ethan stood there silently. His grandfather slowly walked beside him and smiled. "Do you remember the day you laughed at this tiny seed?" Ethan nodded. "I remember." The old man gently placed his hand on the tree. "You see, the tree never grew overnight. It grew because every single day it kept reaching toward the light." Then he looked directly into Ethan's eyes. "And so did you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved softly through the leaves. Everything became quiet. Ethan finally understood. The tree wasn't just a tree. It was a reflection of his own life. Every early morning, every difficult workout, every page he had read, every failure he refused to surrender to, had become another ring inside the tree of his character. Not everyone saw those invisible moments, but they were the reason everyone could now see the results. A few weeks later, Ethan stood in front of thousands of people at a leadership conference. He didn't begin with statistics. He didn't begin with success. Instead, he asked one simple question. What could your life look like 1 year from today if you simply refused to quit? The room fell silent. Then he continued. Most people underestimate what they can achieve in 5 years because they overestimate what they can achieve in 1 week. The greatest transformation doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens one ordinary day at a time. So stop waiting for the perfect opportunity. Stop waiting to feel motivated. Stop waiting until life becomes easier. Start today. Start small. Stay consistent, because every great achievement, every successful business, every healthy body, every meaningful dream is built the exact same way. One decision, one habit, one day, repeated again and again and again. So tonight, before you go to sleep, ask yourself just one question. What is one small promise I can keep tomorrow? Then wake up, keep that promise, and repeat it the next day. Because your future is not created by what you do once. Your future is created by what you do consistently.